Who was I? 17.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a youngster that knew very little, but I knew that the world was a big place. And I also knew that whatever I set my mind to, I was going to be able to do it. You know, I was convinced for some reason that I could do anything in my life. And at the time, my goal was simple, to become an astronaut, and I knew I had to get into the US Air Force to do that. And to do that, I knew I had to get into the South African Air Force. And so 17, I would have just been out of school. I think I matriculated, because my birthday was June, I think I matriculated early,
Okay.
you know, as a 16-year-old. So 17 would have been the gap year prior to going into the Air Force. But yeah, I mean, I was excited about learning how to fly, and you know, what was going to come my way, you know, and maybe one day get into space. I was wide-eyed, and anything was possible.
Beautiful. So finish matric at 16.
Yeah.
A gap year. Process the gap year and then the Air Force with me. How does that look? What do you do in your gap year?
So, you know, it's so interesting, because a couple of friends and I, we saved a bit of money for the first 6 months, and then we went overseas to Europe, and that was our first time we ever traveled. In those days, you could buy this thing called the Eurail Pass, where for very little money, you could travel all around Europe for free on any of the trains.
What?
And so that was our MO. We'd sleep on the train between big cities, wake up dreary-eyed in Madrid, and then tour Madrid. So we didn't pay for accommodation. We just had to, you know. But I'll tell you a story. That was the first time that I realized I grew up in a strange dispensation. I flew Luxavia. It was an old airline that flew to Luxembourg. I don't even think it exists anymore, on that old 747. And I arrived in the evening, and my mate was studying at UCT. So we'd scheduled to meet up he had an aunt in Zurich, but we were going to meet in Vienna and then hook up. So I got on a bus late in the evening, now arriving, this youngster, you know, wide eyes in Europe, and I'm on my way to Vienna. I arrived late at night, and I check into a youth hostel, but it was one of these youth hostels where there's, you know, after hours, it was unattended. So you just had to fill a register, leave your passport, and go and find a bunk bed.
Okay.
And this is about 11 o'clock midnight, so I'll find a bunk bed. About 2 hours later, I'm rudely woken awake by the proprietor of this youth hostel, who has seen my South African passport, and he literally drags me out of bed, and he kicks me out, and he says, "You're not welcome here, you're from South Africa."
So you're a white, young South African.
In 1989. And I'm
Got you.
in Europe. And for the first time in my life, I start thinking that as a young adult now, you know, the rest of the world doesn't think that highly of South Africans. And for the next 2 months, we hook up with a lot of foreigners, and some of them American, you know, that were English speaking. We travel around, and all of the conversation is around apartheid and this potential, you know, change of God, you know. So it was such an interesting year between coming out of school, and obviously in school we had, you know, some of the more kind of proactive teachers were within the ambit of what they could do. You know, we're kind of preparing our hearts and minds for sort of a change in dispensations, but that was still, you know, 6 years, 7 years away.
If you enjoyed this content and you would like to see more, please visit our Mid-Mac Masterclass channel on YouTube. That's where the magic happens. Bye-bye.